Throughout history, there's been a recurring theme that spans across time, cultures, and belief systems: the concept of balance, sometimes referred to as justice, karma, or natural order. Regardless of how it's named, this idea rests on a simple but profound principle: every action invites a corresponding reaction. When people place obstacles in your way with malicious intent, the repercussions don't vanish, they return, often with a precision that can't be dismissed as coincidence. This isn't about revenge or superstition. It's about alignment. Those who attempt to sabotage others ultimately face the results of the environment they created. In some cases, it's not a loud downfall, but a quiet and persistent consequence. And those consequences, emotional unrest, lost relationships, repeated patterns of failure, reveal themselves over time. These aren't punishments handed down arbitrarily, they're the results of choices made. This concept becomes especially significant when applied to individuals we might refer to as the chosen ones. In societal terms, these are people who feel displaced from the norm, those whose experiences and observations often place them on the fringe. Not because they lack value, but because their presence challenges conformity. From a young age, many chosen individuals recognize a subtle misalignment between themselves and the world around them. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's the inability to connect with superficial conversations, or an early awareness of emotional undercurrents others seem to ignore. These are signs, not of defect, but of divergence. While others are encouraged to conform, the chosen are often quietly conditioned to forget their difference. The strategy is simple: make them question themselves early, so they grow dependent on external validation. But here's the overlooked reality. The discomfort others feel in the presence of a chosen one isn't rooted in disdain. It's rooted in exposure. People sense truth when it enters the room, even if they don't understand it. And when someone exists in that kind of clarity, it forces others to confront the version of themselves they've hidden away. Isolation is often misunderstood. For chosen ones, it doesn't stem from inadequacy, it results from environmental misalignment. What's perceived as being left out is often a quiet extraction, one that removes the individual from harmful environments before irreversible damage is done. It's not always clear in the moment. Sometimes, the removal feels like rejection. Friends disappear. Opportunities stall. Communication fades. But in time, it becomes clear: you weren't being pushed away, you were being moved elsewhere for refinement. In this solitude, the chosen develop what many overlook: resilience, discernment, and perspective. While others navigate chaos through noise and distraction, chosen individuals learn through silence and reflection. Their quiet seasons are laboratories. And when they return, they do so with sharpened tools and a calibrated sense of direction. For most, childhood is a time of exploration and learning. But for the chosen, it's often when they begin to notice their divergence. Certain memories persist longer than others. Questions arise that no one else seems to be asking. It might be the feeling that something about reality doesn't quite add up, or a recurring dream that never fades with age. These aren't random occurrences. They are indicators that a different path has been set. While many adults dismiss such observations as imagination, they overlook something critical: the brain stores what it deems significant. And for chosen individuals, these early anomalies are part of a subconscious map. One that can't be decoded by logic alone, but through alignment, clarity, and time. Society has long used subtle mechanisms to push people toward uniformity. For chosen ones, these pressures are especially sharp. The goal isn't just to neutralize them, it's to mold them into something more manageable. This is done through mislabeling, isolation, and performance-based validation. At some point, many chosen individuals begin to internalize the message: I must change to be accepted. But over time, this narrative begins to unravel. The discomfort of living inauthentically becomes louder than the fear of being alone. What was once a source of shame, empathy, sensitivity, a different way of seeing the world, becomes the very compass that guides the chosen back to themselves. And this is where transformation begins. Not when the world changes, but when the chosen no longer require the world's permission to evolve. Empathy is often described as a soft skill, a passive trait. But for the chosen, empathy is anything but passive. It allows them to understand unspoken intentions, identify unseen patterns, and act with foresight instead of impulse. That's not just emotional intelligence. It's strategic awareness. Unfortunately, in many settings, this kind of emotional radar is seen as a liability. Too sensitive. Too emotional. Too involved. The messaging is clear, feeling too much is a problem. But the truth is, empathy becomes a problem only when it's unguarded. When given to those who exploit it, it drains. But when managed, it becomes an instrument for precision. Chosen ones don't just feel more, they see more. And when their insight is paired with clarity, they become virtually impossible to mislead. For many, dreams are nothing more than a nightly release of thoughts. But for the chosen, dreams often serve another purpose. Their messages, complex, symbolic, and often unshakable. Not every dream holds deep meaning, but certain ones linger for a reason. They don't fade like regular memories. They revisit, repeat, and grow more vivid over time. These are not figments of imagination. They're cues. Early warnings. Strategic briefings. But society has taught us to ignore them, dismiss them as fiction. However, when analyzed, these dreams often correlate with real-life shifts, decisions that need to be made, relationships that need to be re-evaluated, paths that need to be reconsidered. In this way, dreams are not entertainment, they're intelligence. And chosen individuals are often born with the ability to interpret them in ways others cannot. It's common for the chosen to look back at their past and view their survival as a mix of luck and coincidence. But deeper reflection reveals a pattern. Narrow escapes. Sudden redirections. Outcomes that defy logical explanation. These weren't strokes of luck, they were protections. And they weren't random, they were structured. What feels like a lucky break in hindsight often turns out to be a deliberate preservation. The universe, or life itself, shields what it values. Not always in visible ways, but in methods that only make sense later. The chosen were never simply surviving, they were being rerouted. Their steps, although interrupted, were being calibrated toward a path that couldn't be revealed too early. When communication dries up and visibility fades, it's easy to believe you've been forgotten. But for the chosen, silence is often a marker of importance. It's the space where transformation happens. Noise distracts, silence refines. While others broadcast, the chosen are taught to observe. And during this observation, something vital happens, they begin to understand their design. Not everyone experiences silence the same way. For the chosen, it's not just quiet, it's instruction. It's a time of deep refinement, and once it's complete, they re-emerge with insights few possess. It's not about becoming louder, it's about becoming undeniable. Society teaches that solitude is loneliness, that time spent alone is time wasted. But for chosen ones, solitude is where the blueprint becomes visible. It is only outside of noise that they begin to hear what the world drowns out. Internal cues. Ancestral echoes. Messages that never made it through the chaos. This isn't philosophical, it's practical. In solitude, clarity becomes audible. Decisions that were once cloudy become precise. Emotions, once heavy, begin to shift. Chosen individuals learn to discern between what is theirs and what they've absorbed from others. This emotional separation is key, because without it, they remain weighed down by expectations that were never meant for them in the first place. The takeaway, what feels like distance from the world is actually proximity to your truth. For chosen ones, solitude isn't just healthy, it's necessary. Most people find comfort in predictability. Chosen ones, however, are built to challenge it. It's why they naturally gravitate toward asking hard questions. Why their presence alone can spark discomfort, even if they haven't said a word. The role of the chosen isn't to appease the status quo, it's to reveal where it's been built on falsehood. This disruption is often unconscious at first. The chosen don't set out to provoke, they simply move from alignment. But because their alignment stands in contrast to manipulation, it reveals fractures in systems that rely on illusion. Whether it's in families, workplaces, or institutions, the chosen tend to become lightning rods. And while this can be isolating, it's also a sign they're doing exactly what they were built to do. This doesn't mean they're superior. It means they were built to see differently, and when you see differently, you move differently. That movement alone creates friction in spaces where deception has been allowed to thrive. The chosen ones don't just feel, they map. They intuitively identify social dynamics, emotional imbalance, unspoken resentment, or dishonesty in a way that's not always verbal but is consistently accurate. What others recognize after conflict, the chosen often sense in advance. This predictive awareness is not mystical, it's data collection. Emotional data. Behavioral patterns. Tonal shifts. When processed over time, it creates an inner guidance system that outpaces conventional logic. The danger arises when this empathy is given without boundaries. Chosen individuals are often pulled into roles of over-caregiving. But with awareness, they learn that empathy isn't just a connection, it's a signal. When used properly, it tells them where to stay, when to leave, and what not to ignore. Every chosen one remembers being asked to just accept things, without question. Whether it was family tradition, religious belief, institutional rules, or social norms, the pressure was always toward quiet compliance. But the chosen rarely comply for long. Their minds don't rest on answers that don't make sense. They replay inconsistencies. They challenge groupthink. They spot contradictions that others overlook. And most importantly, they ask, why, even when there's no reward for doing so. This isn't rebellion, it's pattern recognition. And this cognitive dissonance leads them not away from reality, but deeper into it. Their questions are not about proving others wrong, but about uncovering truth that has been obscured. In this way, curiosity becomes a form of resistance. Not to authority, but to ignorance. The chosen are not distracted by the surface. They see where the thread begins, and they pull. For most people, surviving a series of close calls or making it through difficult times might seem like luck. But for chosen individuals, there's an undeniable pattern: they always land where they need to be, right before things fall apart. These patterns suggest more than luck. They suggest surveillance, an unseen force guiding them through dangers, delays, and decisions. This may not always be understood in the moment, but hindsight always provides the evidence. Near misses, last-minute decisions, or moments of intuition that prevented disaster. The chosen are not protected because they're favored. They're protected because their timing is pivotal. The takeaway: what you thought was coincidence was orchestration. And it points to something critical. Your presence isn't random. You are being preserved not to escape challenge, but to complete something you were born to fulfill. As noted earlier, chosen individuals often experience dreams that feel layered, charged, and instructive. But now it's time to shift the perspective entirely. Those dreams are not entertainment. They are a form of technology, spiritual intelligence operating outside the limits of linear time. Chosen ones receive messages not just for themselves, but sometimes for others. Warnings, directions, confirmations, and more importantly, strategy. These dreams often contain future symbols. People they haven't met. Places they haven't seen. And messages that only make sense months or years later. This isn't magic. It's alignment. When someone is in tune with themselves, their subconscious becomes a channel, not just for random impressions, but for targeted insight. As such, chosen individuals are encouraged to treat their dreams not as fluff, but as intelligence. Write them down. Track the symbols. Pay attention to repetition. Often, what seemed irrational at first becomes invaluable later. There's a misconception that the chosen are invisible because they're inadequate. But the deeper truth is this: they're hidden because their emergence too early would have made them vulnerable to premature attack or exploitation. The environments they were pulled from, the people they had to release, the doors that refused to open, were all part of that delay. The silence wasn't neglect, it was insulation. The world simply wasn't calibrated yet to hold the version of them that was still in formation. And now, the signal is changing. The curtain is pulling back. The chosen are no longer required to hide. Their message, their presence, their identity, none of it can remain dormant. Because the environment that once rejected them is now on the verge of collapse. And their insight is what will help rebuild what comes after. This isn't fantasy. It's timing. The chosen do not find purpose through trial and error. They uncover it through alignment. It's not about external discovery, it's about internal recovery. The memories of who they are have been buried under conditioning, shame, distraction, and doubt. But they were never deleted. And the more the chosen remove what isn't them, false roles, forced beliefs, inherited guilt, the more space they create for purpose to emerge. It doesn't arrive as a detailed plan. It arrives in layers. In moments of resonance. In sentences that stir something inside. It's not a map, it's a magnet. And the chosen feel it when they're near it. This is why identity work matters. Not because the world needs labels, but because clarity of self activates purpose. Finally, it's important to say this clearly. There is no replacement for the chosen. Finally, it's important to say this clearly. There is no replacement for the chosen. Their essence, their tone, their combination of insight and experience, it cannot be replicated. It can be mimicked. But never duplicated. This is why their silence is so disruptive. And their presence, so influential. It's not ego. It's architecture. The chosen weren't built to compete. They were built to construct. And the work they do, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, leaves impact. When they speak, systems adjust. When they move, environments react. When they return after isolation, they do not blend, they shift the center of gravity. Being chosen doesn't mean being better. It means being responsible. Responsible for becoming, not performing. Responsible for aligning, not arguing. And responsible for continuing, even when it feels like no one understands the weight you carry. Because the world does not need another influencer. It needs integrators. Builders. Silent architects who don't just want to be seen, they want to recalibrate the structures themselves. The chosen were never meant to impress. They were meant to awaken. As we reach the final section of this message, it's time to address one unavoidable truth, one that cannot be diluted or deflected. If you've related to this narrative, if it echoed in places you couldn't explain, if it clarified things you felt for years but didn't know how to put into words, then you already understand, you're not becoming someone new. You're remembering who you've always been. The chosen ones are not created by status, performance, or perfection. They are recognized by pattern. Quiet disruptions. Early awareness. Lifelong separation from the mainstream flow. The signs weren't accidental. The experiences weren't random. The delays weren't punishment. And your intuition wasn't paranoia, it was protection. For too long, many of you have wondered if you were too much for the people around you, or too different to ever feel understood. But now, with clearer insight, you may begin to realize that the very qualities you were taught to suppress were indicators of design, not defects. This realization changes everything. You don't need to prove your role. The impact of your presence already confirms it. You don't need to compete for validation. The strength of your resilience already sets you apart. And you don't need to be loud to be effective. Even your silence has been reshaping spaces that never deserved your voice in the first place. Your experiences, especially the difficult ones, were not evidence of failure. They were training. Every betrayal exposed something important. Every setback redirected you to something safer. Every closed door preserved your energy for a path you didn't yet have the clarity to walk. The chosen aren't identified by how smooth their journey was, but by how many times they rose when they had no reason to. And by how deeply they feel truth before it's ever spoken aloud. You may still be walking through transition. You may still be letting go of identities that never belonged to you. And you may still be in a phase where the silence feels heavier than the answers. That's alright. Because for the chosen, clarity doesn't arrive all at once. It unfolds. Quietly. Deeply. Irrevocably. Not through outside approval, but through internal alignment. And that is the moment of shift. When you stop needing permission to stand as who you are. When you stop apologizing for asking hard questions. When you stop offering access to people who never valued your insight. When you stop shrinking your language, your vision, or your power just to make others feel comfortable. That's when you become fully operational. And from that point forward, you're no longer just navigating the world, you're influencing it. Quietly. Precisely. Permanently. The era of doubt is ending. The age of pretending to be ordinary is closing. And the time for hiding in plain sight is finished. You were never meant to fit inside their mold. Because you were always the blueprint. So the final message is this: don't wait for others to confirm your identity. Don't wait for external signs to move forward. Don't expect understanding from those who fear what they can't define. Move anyway. Walk anyway. Speak when it's time. Stay silent when strategy requires it. But never again confuse invisibility with insignificance. You weren't forgotten. You were fortified. You weren't delayed. You were being refined. And now, the stage you feared stepping onto is ready, and it's not about applause. It's about impact. Not everyone will understand the decisions you make. Not everyone will see why you become who you've become. And that's fine. Because the ones who were meant to find you, they won't need you to explain it. They'll just know. If this message resonated with you, if it confirmed what you've always sensed but never fully said, then don't let the moment pass. Like this video to anchor your presence in this awakening. Subscribe to stay connected to content built for clarity, purpose, and growth. And if you know you're one of the chosen, the irreplaceable blueprint they tried to erase, drop the number 99 in the comments to affirm it. This is more than content, it's alignment. Every interaction you make, whether it's a like, a comment, or a share, strengthens this collective frequency. So share this with someone who's been questioning their path, searching for confirmation, or recovering from rejection. Because truth travels farther when it's carried together. You're not here by accident. You're here by design. And now that you've remembered who you are, there's no going back.